Hey brothers and sisters, welcome to Lush and Salty Aquariums. My name is Stefan. Thanks for coming to the channel. Alright, a week or two ago I made a video on this tank, the 32 gallon long SR Aquaristic. It's on my rack system. Woo, boring. And I said it was super jungly, and I showed you that, and I wondered if I should do any trimming, and well, I finally buckled down and did it. It's unbelievable that this tank looks like this, given I pulled a bucket of pure plant matter out. All right, so especially in this corner, I had, honestly folks, a shit ton of sage. I think that's what it was, and as opposed, it was creeping every which way into the scape, along the glass, and then it was doubling up on itself and becoming this intense tangle like you see on the side of a road when they don't take care of it, and it's just endless undergrowth and bushes. It was like that. And it was cool, and it was probably helping the tank in some respects, but I pulled it, right? And so I put in some cryptocairn that I had in my other tanks, and these are just a few little plantlets of what was that intense jumble of sage, or, you know, I'm thinking it's not sage, maybe chainsword. I always get that sort of plant confused because they're so similar looking. Their taxonomy may be very different, but very similar. And in the back, that's water sprite, good old water sprite. Now that plant I pulled from the sump a month ago, and I had put just a tiny bit amidst this. I just threw it in the tank, honestly, to see what would happen, and it stuck to this wood here and became bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I pulled it out of the mid-level of the aquarium, and I put it back over there, and I just weighed it down with a little rock, basically, because that plant is happy rooting and floating, and combination of both. I love its toxic green color, right? And I mean that in a good way. Toxic lime green, right? That's what they call corals in the saltwater hobby when they're super green like that. Now you can see this is Heiger's air disc. It's off right now, and I'll talk about that in a second. I added a bubbler in here, but I didn't want to use just any old air stone. And so Heiger makes these really sweet acrylic with a heavy bottom, and they're just kind of high tech. I mean, I know it's just an air stone, but when it bubbles, it creates a beautiful cascade of bubbles. And I don't think there's a euphemism for bubbles, or a synonym rather. Bubbles is the word for it. And it's off now, and I beg your pardon, but that at least allows me to show you some of the other plants in and around it. And the reason I have it off is because the CO2 checker, I don't know if the camera shows, but it's bluer than I want, which means not enough CO2 is in the water column. Now, granted, the CO2 comes in all the way over there. I've got no lid on this tank, a lot of surface agitation now that I've cleaned the filter especially, and the air stone oxygen bubbles, that will pull it out of the water. So I have the air on a timer, and when the lights go off here, just like the CO2, that'll go off and the bubbler will go on. And so when CO2 is not necessary, which is in the evening, I'll get the benefit of oxygenating the water and creating a more pleasant overall environment for this fabulous tank, right? And it's my first tank that I set up in Chicago, and I'm really happy with it. It's not quite like what I thought it would be. I was going for sort of a river to mimic the shape of this tank, and now it's basically a horizontal jungle aquarium. So this is Sterigen repens. Now I did not clip that from the last video, but I trimmed the hell out of this Hygrophila pinnifada, this plant right here, and that helps it. It helps it get compact and sort of, you know, less gangly, less stringy, nicer colors. It's such a wonderful plant. I really like it. I pulled out all, or at least most, of the kind of rotting away Java fern leaves. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with Java fern. It's not as easy as people say, and there's some hidden tips and tricks that you'll learn the hard way. Like if you buy those plants at Petco or PetSmart, they have thread wrapped around the roots, and nobody knows that and doesn't say it. And if you just stick it in the ground like I did, up until I saw a video saying there's thread around the roots, you'll get like that. You know, the leaves will slowly but surely just kind of become decrepit. There you go. And you know, I know that's part of the look. It's a bit natural, au naturel, but it frustrates me, Java fern, but it's still such an iconic plant, and you can put it anywhere, so maybe it has benefits that are like easy, but in terms of getting robust, perfect plant growth, not been my experience. I mean, I have it in most of my tanks, so don't get me wrong. This is Ludwigia repens. I'm pretty sure it's doing really well in here, just all red. Now I could be wrong about this plant. I bought so many plants and did so much scaping, I didn't save all the labels, and I'm just not super expert. I'm not like Tony Tropica, right? I don't have all that stuff memorized. I thought this was Hyperoides, the stem plant here, but it could be golden Aeneas. And whatever it is, these are cuttings from cuttings from cuttings. It does pretty well in this tank. One problem I have with this plant is the higher up it goes, the undercarriage will suffer. And then these little leaves tend to, it's sensitive for such a robust stalk. Those leaves are fine, and they will fall off and float around, and you know. I put in a pogo stem and octopus plant in the back there. My new best friend, my new favorite plant. I'm sure it's going to do fine, although I had to move the nozzle from the current because I don't believe that plant will do fine if it's being pushed like this Veil is by that water. Now Veil is classic for bending at the top, which is what you want. It's part of its iconic look, feel, nomenclature. It's what people like about it. But pogo stem and octopus, you'll see it in very delicate high-end aquascapes being used for its wonderful see-through style of growth, and if it's all being blown around, that'll get lost. So I've got that in there. There's a little bit more of this Aeneas, golden Aeneas or Hyperoides, which I trimmed the crap out of it. I've got some Anubias. Happy to report that does not have algae on it. This is some Christmas moss that I don't recall ever planting it there, but there's a nice little bed, and since it's not screwing up the other plants, I'm gonna leave it. Moss has a way of being wonderful at first in aquascapes, and then it becomes like a squatter. You can't get rid of it. That's actually a very good metaphor for moss. Up here, I took out what was Oase's smallest quote-unquote canister filter. I think it's the 100 or the 50, and I've never been real happy with that filter, and so I was just using it as a supplement filter for the main workhorse down here, the classic Oase. I think that's the 350. That's a great filter with the heater built in, and it's more than adequate for 30 gallons. but because it was long, and because the tank is long, and because back here the water can get a little bit stale, that's why the air stone, that's why I had that filter in there, more for current than filtration. Well, I pulled it out. I took some of the matrix, which I was using for media, in that little canister, and I put it in this tiny hang-on back filter, one of those $15 knockoffs that you get on Amazon from China. And I put in a button fern. I cleaned the roots heavily, and I just plopped it in over some of that biomedia, and that's it, right? Ferns aren't the first plant you think of when you're doing emerged growth. The pothos is, and there's some pothos, and there's some pothos. But I wanted to do something a little different. I actually was watching, I think it's with Dr. Novak, and he just goes on and on about how pothos and emergent plants don't pull nitrate from the water column, and that may or may not be true, or but it looks so freaking awesome. And my one comment to him was just that, like, I don't think the plant lives and dies by its ability to pull nitrates from the water. I think it just looks badass to have it growing out of the tank like this, and he chuckled, but yet still making videos refuting the nitrate sucking ability of pothos. You see some here in these little fun stick on the side trays, clear trays with variegated plastic for the roots to come out. So I've got that in there. I'm gonna watch it closely, because ferns they like wet for sure, obviously, but running water through it, I'm not so certain, but we'll see. I think it'll do good. Anyway, I digress. Dr. Novak had a button fern, and he was like ragging on it, and I just thought it looked cool, and he actually was discouraging people to use it, but it got me to use it. So there's the power of advertising. Even when you're dumping on a product, if a client likes it, there you go. Now I think this is, what do they call this? Angel's tongue or some, it has some name that befits its spear-like shape. That's a little $10 plant from Home Depot. It's grown tremendously here, there, and then of course I've got some fun hardscape similar to what I have in here, supplementing the outside of this tank. So, God, I've been forgetting the fish. I do that. It's like when I had saltwater tanks, I always talked about the corals and forgot the glorious fish, and that'll happen because plants can be more maintenance, so you're more obsessed with them. These are the dozen or so white cloud mountain minnows, the long fin variety. Very shimmery, very healthy. They like cooler water, so over time I've lowered the temperature to around 75, and it could be cooler, but since I've got all sorts of other more or less hidden fish in here that might prefer warmer water, I split the difference, and so I keep it at 75. The super duper 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 red bristlenose, and I'm gonna find it, is in this tank. It was a very popular video when I featured him, and he's unfortunately sitting on more or less red substrate, but that's him, center frame. He is redder than any of the other ones I have in any of my other tanks. And so much so, people said, will you breed him with one of mine? And I haven't thought about using my fish as studs, but anything's possible. You just have to ask. So that's the update. You see what a clean filter will do. After a while, even a great filter like Awaze, it just loses its vim and vigor. And when I did a thorough cleaning, it's not even at full blast. I actually have it throttled down a little bit, and there's a way you can do that with Awaze, even though it's technically not in the manual. And I've done it, and as it gets more thick, I'll just turn it up. And I end up having to do filter cleaning way more than the textbooks say, but Fortunately, I get into a zen. It's all labor of love, and I think the results, I don't want to sound arrogant. They don't speak for themselves. I give most of my tanks, a B plus, A minus, but I couldn't. I couldn't imagine trying to replicate an aquarium like this without outstanding filtration and water movement. And I was doing it without water movement to some extent back here, and I had to add not only that filter that was before this one and now that one, but the air stone as well, which will kick on when the lights go off. So this is the real ending, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please, questions, comments, I'd love to hear from you. As always, keep your hands in the tank. Ciao for now.